Confession, friends, I am actually a fan of Hamburger Helper. I grew up eating it occasionally, and when I see the box in the grocery store, I'm still kind of nostalgic about it. If you are a fan of that particular box dinner, then I've got a great video for you today because I'm going to show you how I make some copycat versions of that particular box dinner using just some regular ingredients from my kitchen. If you are a fan of Hamburger Helper, I hope you will leave me a comment below and let me know your favorite kind. I actually did a community post about this and it had a ton of views and comments on it, so I'm glad that I'm not alone. But I've also learned how to make a few one-pot meals that are very similar to those, and I can actually stretch them farther. I know exactly what's going into them, so I'm going to show you a few of those recipes today. Tonight, we are going to dupe the Hamburger Helper cheesy Italian shells. For this recipe, I am actually going to use Italian sausage instead of ground beef. So if you wanted to use ground beef, I would suggest adding some Italian seasoning, salt and pepper to your taste, onion powder, garlic powder, maybe a little bit of red pepper flake if you like a kick. I'm not going to add very much seasoning because the sausage itself is already seasoned and it's going to help season the dish. I am using 1 pound of ground sweet Italian pork sausage, 1 can of diced tomatoes. I'm using the kind that have a little seasoning in them, and the basil, garlic, and oregano, 1 8-ounce can of tomato sauce, 12 ounces of pasta. I just picked up a 12-ounce package of the medium shells, 1 cup of water, and 1.5 cups of milk. And I'm going to use this Italian 5 cheese blend. I got this with an Ibotta rebate, and normally I like to shred my own cheese, but I think this is going to work just fine, and this will give it a nice flavor because it's got some mozzarella, provolone, Parmesan, Asiago, and Romano cheeses. But you could use just plain mozzarella. You could use a mixture of mozzarella and Parmesan. You could even use cheddar. I think that would work just fine in this dish as well. I'm just finishing up browning my ground sausage. Now I'm adding my tomatoes and my tomato sauce, my shells, 12 ounces of pasta, 1.5 cups of milk, 1 cup of water. I'm going to stir that all together, and then I'm going to bring this up to a simmer, and I'm going to cover it and let it cook for about 10 minutes until the pasta is done, and then we'll be ready to stir in the cheese. I'm going to add about 1/2 cup more water because I feel like it just needs it. There we go. I said I was going to go easy on the seasonings for this because the sausage is already seasoned, but I did add a little bit of cracked black pepper. I'm going to sprinkle in just a little bit of this Italian seasoning. The lid was loose, I almost dumped a whole bunch in. And I'll probably add just a smidge of salt, not very much, just a little sprinkle, kind of stir that in. And this is simmering, so it's ready to pop the lid on and let the pasta cook for about 10 minutes. My pasta has been cooking for about 12 minutes and looks like it is pretty much done. What I'm going to do is stir in the cheese now. I'm going to stir in an 8-ounce bag of cheese, so 8 ounces of shredded cheese. And then I'm going to turn the heat off. I'm going to do that now actually. And I'm going to pop the lid back on and I'm going to let it sit covered for just a few minutes, just like you do with box Hamburger Helper. It says to let it sit and it will thicken a little bit upon standing. Turned out fantastic. I've already tasted a few bites and I can tell you, I really think using the Italian sausage in place of the ground beef makes a big difference for flavor. So if you can, go that route, but if not, like I said, make sure that you're seasoning it a little bit more if you're just using plain ground beef or ground turkey. Today's video is sponsored by ButcherBox. ButcherBox offers high-quality meat, including 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, humanely raised pork, and wild-caught seafood, and they deliver it right to your doorstep. Most of the videos I make on this channel revolve around what's going on in my kitchen, including how I'm saving time, how I'm saving money, and how I'm saving my own personal sanity trying to feed my family of 5. Well, sometimes I am budgeting my money, and sometimes I am budgeting my time. And where ButcherBox is concerned, I am buying back some of my time so that I can select the exact cuts of meat that I want for the recipes I'm making for my family and have them delivered to my door. This has especially come in handy in recent months whenever I have come across shortages and I don't want to have to run around town to different stores trying to find the things that I need. Whenever I'm ordering meat from ButcherBox, I get to select what's going in my custom box, and so I know exactly what's coming and when it's arriving. ButcherBox offers 5 different boxes. 4 of them are curated for you, and one of them is a custom box where you get to select the cuts of meat that are coming to you. I also really like that ButcherBox allows you to select the frequency that you're receiving your boxes, and you can skip a delivery at any time. As a family that eats less meat, especially compared to years previous, I like that I can purchase what I think we will want or use. I can stretch it out across multiple meals, and I don't have to get a box every single month if I don't want to. I've actually been a ButcherBox customer for 2 years now. I signed up for a ButcherBox membership before they were even a sponsor on my channel. And the special that I got when I signed up with ButcherBox is the one that they're running now, and that is free ground beef for life. If you visit the link in the description box below, new ButcherBox members are going to receive, in addition to everything that's coming in their box, 2 pounds of grass-fed ground beef. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When I'm selecting the things that I want to come in my box, I'm going to select the things that I think are the highest value items. Things that are either hard to find in my area or that I think are a really good price. 3 of the items that I pretty much always get in my box are the salmon fillets, the bone-in pork shoulder, which has always been more than 5.5 pounds for me, and I can stretch for multiple meals for my family, and also the organic chicken breast. So signing up for ButcherBox when they were running that free ground beef for life special was actually a really great thing, because that's not something I would typically choose in my ButcherBox because I don't think it's as good a value as some of those other items, but I don't need to select it as one of my items because I'm getting 2 pounds of grass-fed ground beef in addition to the other 6 items that are already coming in my box. So if you are interested in finding out more about that free ground beef for life deal, or you just want to have a look around the ButcherBox website, you can visit the link in the description box below. And thank you again to ButcherBox for sponsoring today's video. Tonight I am attempting to make a version of the cheesy enchilada rice hamburger helper. I'm actually going to use ground turkey instead of ground beef. You could use ground beef if you want. Whenever I posted the community post on my YouTube page about Hamburger Helper, this one got mentioned quite a lot. It was right up there with the stroganoff and then the cheeseburger mac, which I think is sort of like their flagship flavor. So I thought we would give this one a go. It's probably not going to be exactly the same, but I'm hoping it's going to be even better. For this recipe, I'm going to use 1 pound of ground turkey, and actually this ground turkey from ButcherBox is very, very lean. I'm going to use a red bell pepper, but I only had little mini bell peppers, so I just picked out a few of those for my little mini bell pepper bag. You could use a different color pepper if you wanted to as well. I have half an onion. I'll chop all of that up. 1 can of diced green chilies, 1 can of tomato sauce. I'm going to use 2.5 cups of chicken broth, and I'm also going to use about a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half of taco seasoning. If you're using a packet of taco seasoning, I probably wouldn't use the entire packet, maybe half of it. 1.5 cups of rice. I'm having to use 2 different kinds. I have about 1 cup in here and half a cup in here, so it's perfect. We'll use those up. 6 ounces of cheese. That is 1.5 cups of cheese. I will shred that up. We're going to add that at the end. And then salt and pepper to taste, and a little bit of oil for the veggies and the rice at the beginning. I am browning my ground turkey and my onions and my peppers all together. I also used a fairly generous amount, probably about 3 tablespoons or so of olive oil, since the meat is so lean. It's not going to render any fat itself to help the veggies soften up. So I went ahead and used some olive oil in there. I'm also going to add my rice. Now that everything's almost done browning, I'm going to let the rice brown along with the meat and the veggies for just the last couple minutes while the meat is just finishing up cooking. Okay, that already smells really good with the onions and the peppers browning in there with it. I just want to make sure that the turkey is completely cooked, because when you're working with ground turkey as opposed to ground beef, you got to be careful about that. Although we are going to bring this to a boil for several minutes, so I think it's probably going to be just fine. I'm going to go ahead and add some taco seasoning. Like I said, I'm going to use about 1.5 tablespoons, so like a heaping tablespoon, about half of a packet. And I'm also going to add about 2 teaspoons or so, half a tablespoon of my broth base. If you're using chicken broth, you don't have to use broth base, but I'm just going to add water here a little bit. I've got my tomato sauce, my chopped green chilies. Put a little water in the can because I want to make sure I get all that tomato sauce out. And now 2.5 cups of water. I want to stir that all together. I'm going to bring that to a low boil, so bring that to a simmer. Pop the lid on, let it simmer on low for 10 minutes, and then turn the stove off, but leave the lid on. This is how I cook rice. If you watch my channel, anything with rice. So in review, I'm gonna bring this to a simmer, pop the lid on, let it simmer for about 10 minutes on low, then turn the heat completely off and let it sit for about 10 minutes. If you wanted to, you could add some beans, you could add some corn, especially if you wanna stretch it or make the serving sizes larger. I'm just gonna make it as I showed you tonight, and we're gonna have this with a side of steamed veggies, probably some broccoli. I've also seen several people say that they used the Hamburger Helper enchilada dish as like burrito filling, like that they would make it as directed on the package and then put it in tortillas and have it as burritos, or use it as a topping for chips, for nachos. So there's some ideas for you too. I feel like a video on Copycat Hamburger Helper recipes would not be complete without a dupe of what I consider the OG Hamburger Helper dish, and that is the cheeseburger macaroni. I discovered a really good version of this on a website called southernmom.com. I will leave it linked in the description box below. I've been making it for a few years now, but today we're going to make it in the Instant Pot. That's right, friends. I finally took the plunge and I was able to procure an Instant Pot. My mom gave me hers actually because she hasn't been using it very much. So I have a video coming out of my first attempts with recipes, my first recipes I'm making in the Instant Pot, but I thought that I would end this video with a version of this particular recipe for the Instant Pot. So I'll leave the original one linked in the description box below. She shows you how to make it on the stove, but here's how I'm going to make it in the Instant Pot today. One of the things that I think makes this recipe really great is that the seasoning mix, I think, is a really good dupe of what comes in the box. And it just uses some pantry staple seasonings that you'd probably find in a lot of standard spice cabinets. So we're gonna use 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of paprika. And actually, paprika is a pretty common ingredient in mac and cheese recipes that I find. When I make mac and cheese from scratch, I usually use the Pioneer Woman's recipe from her cookbook that you've often seen in the background in my kitchen. And that recipe calls for paprika as well. 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, and then cracked black pepper to taste. Also, one of the tricks I use when I'm mixing up seasoning mixes like this is that I group them according to how I'm going to measure them. So you might have noticed that all the things that were just 1 teaspoon were in one part of my counter, and then I moved up from there to 2 teaspoons and then a tablespoon because it's easier for me to remember and I don't always have to refer back to the original recipe. I will also say that salt and pepper are to taste, and if you are used to the box mix, you are probably going to want to play around with the salt level. Some people like more salt, some people like less salt, some people have to watch their sodium intake, so it's up to you how much salt you put in it. But this particular mix, this particular recipe isn't going to be quite as salty as the box mix, so adjust as necessary. Now that we have our spice mix, these are the other ingredients that we're going to use today, and it's not a whole lot. I mean, it's pretty simple after you make up the spice mix. I have a pound of ground beef here, but I'm only going to use half of that. I'm going to use just 8 ounces or half a pound of ground beef. I'll save the other half for another recipe later in the week. I have 2 cups of milk, 1 cup of water. I have 4 ounces of cheddar cheese, which I will shred up myself. This would be the equivalent to about 1 cup of shredded cheddar. We won't add that till the very end. And then in this bowl, I have 8 ounces of elbow macaroni. I do not trust dry measuring cups to measure pasta, so I always weigh it out on my scale. So this would be about half of a 1 pound package if you don't have a scale. If you wanted to add more pasta, my rule for pasta is typically 8 ounces of water for every 4 ounces of pasta, or 2-to-1 water to pasta ratio. So if you wanted to make it 12 ounces, you wanted to use the entire pound of pasta, you would just have to calculate that and add enough liquid to offset the extra pasta. I have my Instant Pot on the saute function, and I'm just finishing up browning my little half pound of ground beef here. I'm gonna go ahead and turn everything off and add my seasonings, my water. A little stir before I add everything else. Make sure that all of those seasonings are dissolving. Now I'm adding my pasta, 2 cups of milk. Stir that around a little bit. And now I'll just pop the lid on, maybe. Seal. And I'm going to set this to pressure cook for 4 minutes. Okay, so it took a few minutes for the Instant Pot to come up to pressure. It cooked for 4 minutes and then it switched over to warm. And honestly, I got busy doing something else. So by the time I got out here to manually release the pressure, like to switch it to manual release, there was hardly any pressure left in it. So it did just natural release for several minutes. And then I did a manual release and the little thingy popped up almost immediately for me. But just if you're using an Instant Pot, you know, read the manual, follow the directions. This is the part of it that really scares me the most. And that's why I've been kind of slow to get on the Instant Pot bandwagon. One of the reasons. It should be good to go. So I'm going to open it up now. Boop. Boop. And here's what it looks like so far. Just going to stir it up a little bit. And I know it doesn't look very cheesy yet, and that's because we haven't added the cheese yet. So let's do that. All right, the cheese is in there. I'm gonna add just a splash more of milk just to kind of give it something to stir it up with. And it's still very hot, so the cheese should melt just fine. So I'm gonna stir that in, and I'm just gonna set the lid on top of it so that the cheese can kind of melt with all of the hot pasta and the steam that's in there. And then it'll be done. Here it is, and I think this looks and smells fantastic. This does not disappoint. I've made this recipe several times, and I feel like it is just really a very good, very close copycat version, if not like the exact same thing. I mean, I think it's better than the box Hamburger Helper because I feel like things always taste better whenever you make them homemade or semi-homemade, and this is so easy, especially in the Instant Pot. You can make this on the stove. Visit the website in the description box, and it'll tell you exactly how you make it on the stove. I've made it on the stove as a one-pot meal many times. The Instant Pot doesn't make it necessarily faster. It just makes it a little bit less work. Like you don't have to watch the pot and make sure that it's not boiling over, making sure that you have enough liquid, you know, that kind of thing. So I could just walk away, you know, and the Instant Pot would do the work. But really easy recipe. Like I said, in my opinion, the best dupe of the flagship Hamburger Helper recipe, the Cheeseburger Mac. Thank you again to ButcherBox for sponsoring today's video. And if you are interested in checking out that free ground beef for life deal, be sure to visit the link in the description box below. And check out this video that I made last month if you want more one-pan recipe ideas.